Can Texas Tech really be challenged next year, or will they roll to a Big 12 championship once again? That will be explored on today's Locked On crossover from all over the Big 12.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Christian Rauh of Locked On Kansas State is here with Jake Hatch of Locked On BYU Cougars as well. And we thank you all for making this your first listen or your first view every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Shout out to our everydayers for helping make that the case. We are going all around the Big 12, and I want to dive right into it. Jake, got to start with you and the BYU Cougars. Is your team the biggest threat to Texas Tech repeating as Big 12 champions in 2026?
I would say yes, because BYU retains a ton of the talent that obviously challenged Texas Tech for Big 12 supremacy a year ago. And the hope is, with a full offseason of work, Bear Bachmeier can elevate his game that, in theory, should help BYU be far more competitive in a potential matchup in the Big 12 title game against Texas Tech. But obviously, some offseason controversy being stirred around Provo right now involving their leading returning receiver in Parker Kingston, him being arrested on suspicion of felony rape. So we got an interesting offseason ahead of us. But on paper, BYU absolutely has the horses to challenge Texas Tech.
Christian, you buy that? BYU's the number one threat. They were number two last year in the conference. Does that mean they're just automatically there, or do you think anybody's rising up in the Big 12 to challenge mighty Texas Tech, my beloved Red Raiders? I would just like to make that very clear.
It's easy to lean towards BYU and say they're the favorite to compete with Texas Tech. But what have we seen the last 2 years in this conference? What have we seen, Jake, Spencer? We've seen a team that has rise from the bottom, that has been either projected to be towards the very bottom or at the very bottom and win the whole dang thing or be really close. So even though BYU is probably one of the favorites, there's going to be a dark horse or two. And that's the biggest question. Who will those dark horses be? Will it be something as crazy as Oklahoma State, Eric Morris coming out of nowhere? I don't know if we're going that far, but I think there's a possibility that we get one of those teams that are just not expected and all of a sudden find themselves in Arlington.
Christian, was that a jab at me and where I had BYU power rated going into last season? Is that what I heard in there? Because I'm deeply hurt that you would bring up such erroneous mistakes of mine and make me look bad to the college football public.
Me talk bad about you on your own show. I would never. Of course, it's absolutely calling you out on you for not playing BYU as high as they should be. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, honestly, I'll be completely honest. I didn't have BYU as high as either. I thought the Jake Retzlaff thing was going to be more serious than it actually was. I definitely will be the first to agree with you on that point. It's been BYU shocked the system. Can they do it again next year? And they got a whole bunch of drama, as Jake just mentioned, for the second year in a row. Can they make that happen? Can they get past that? If so, then yeah, I think they're the favorite against Texas Tech.
I think the next team that pops into my head here, Hatch, for one that can threaten Texas Tech is the team that played them a year ago, lost by double digits, as most of the Big 12 did, quite literally, when they went up against the Red Raiders. And that was a game that was closer than the final score indicated. Now, there have been some notable losses because of a head coaching change, but I still jump to Utah. I like Morgan Scalley a lot. I think the roster's solid. You've got Devon Dampier coming back into the fold for the Utes at quarterback. I think they're in a good spot there.
You'd have to think so, because they've got talent returning, and obviously having your starting quarterback come back, Spencer, that's a big deal for Utah. And the biggest concern I have for Utah is how are they going to look in the trenches? They have 2 first-round offensive tackles that are off to the NFL draft. The other 3 offensive linemen that were the starters this past year are all off to the NFL as well, as they were all seniors. So you're going to have to revamp that offensive front. Now, they do have a highly rated freshman in Kelvin Obot coming in, and then flipping over to the defensive line. That was one of Utah's weaknesses this past season, which is crazy to say because they for decades at this point have been so dominant on the defensive line. So long as their trench play measures up, you cannot discount Utah being in the mix here, but that will be a question they will have to answer very early on this coming season.
Christian, what's your look at the Utes?
I'm leaning a little bit more of them being one of the biggest fallers in the Big 12 as my
initial
season pick. One of the biggest ones. I think the transition of Kyle Whittingham is going to be big. I think they did lose a lot more talent than maybe some others are actually worried about. I think that trenches, I saw it firsthand. Joe Jackson, Kansas State, breaking records against those trenches last year against Utah. I don't know if they've fully been able to recover and do that for 2026. If I had to pick a team that was going to rival BYU, that was still in that mix in 2025 to 2026, how about the Houston Cougars? The Cougars have done over the last couple of years has been really impressive. Willie Fritz has really built himself. He's put an exciting model into building in the portal this year, leaning on heavy veteran presence, and that 2026 class is super impressive. Not only does he have Connor Weigman returning, but he has the quarterback of the future sitting behind him. I really like where Houston sits this year.
Jake, go ahead, Jake. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say Willie Fritz is an incredible coach. I love what he's done at every stop in his coaching career. There are these coaches that they just know what they're doing. He did it at Tulane. He's done it at multiple stops before that. And Houston is on the rise. My question for the Houston Cougars is if they're going to challenge BYU, are they going to be able to match BYU's physicality? That's the one question mark I have for Houston. Now, that can be answered very quickly, obviously, early on this season. But if they come out and play the way that they can, Connor Weigman, who knows Keyshawn Henderson plays a role at some point this season as the 5-star top freshman coming into this league, Houston's absolutely going to be in the mix. I just have to see them really match wits with the best in this league, like a Texas Tech, like a BYU.
We're going to have our first taste of Houston, Texas Tech before any other in the Big 12. That's the Big 12 opener between those two. So we're going to really find out if that's true or not right away.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, Christian, it's interesting that you brought up Houston without me prompting you because they were on my mind along with Arizona. Now, Houston didn't surprise me last year with the season they wound up having, beating LSU in their bowl game to get to 10 wins. Yeah. Arizona, though, at 9 wins, it didn't shock me, but it's not what I expected from them going into the year either. And I look at both of those teams and kind of felt the way that you feel about Utah, Christian, which is I think between the two of them, one of them's got to fall off at least a little, right? Those were borderline Big 12 championship teams. They were both 6-win teams in conference play.
If we were having this conversation exactly 1 year ago today, I would tell you that Brett Brennan is the first coach to be fired.
We all thought that. Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. A lot of folks thought the Big 12 is indeed a chaos conference. I mean, a lot of them can be. The ACC was the real chaos conference last year. But Christian, we've gone this far and we haven't mentioned a team that I thought was making the Big 12 championship game last year and let me down. So they owe me an apology. And that would be your Kansas State Wildcats. Colin Klein takes over. Avery Johnson still there for a year, I don't even know what, starting a quarterback. Do you like him to be able to contend in the Big 12?
It'll be his third year starting quarterback, and I do like this team. I think they had a great transfer portal. If you want to talk about, transfer portals the way it's really been since 2019 or so, I think this is probably one of the best transfer portal classes that Kansas State's ever brought in, let alone being in Colin Klein's first year. But I don't think the expectation for Kansas State is Arlington or bust this year. So I don't think it's a team that is going to be competing with Texas Tech and BYU. If it happens, great. But I think this is more of a raise the floor because Avery Johnson returned to an 8-9 win at the very bit of your floor/ceiling, kind of right in that spot. The fact that you don't have to play week 0 is the best thing that I get to talk about all offseason. The fact that you don't get to actually play Farmageddon in week 12 where it fits absolutely matters. The best part about Kansas State's schedule is, again, for the second year in a row, who they don't play. They don't play BYU 2 years in a row. And this year, they also don't play Texas Tech. So I do like their chances of having a good season, but I don't know if I'm going to go out and say that Arlington or bust is the expectation this year.
Not playing BYU. What are you, Notre Dame? Anyway, they do play this year, but They bailed bailing on. They're good enough to play them in Provo, but not the Pop-Tarts Bowl. The disrespect goes absolutely crazy. And
as a former Pop-Tart champion, I agree. Disrespect is at an all-time high.
The people's national champion, gentlemen.
You're darn right. You're darn right, Jay Catch. When do we get back? Will the Big 12 get 2 teams into the college football playoff next year? They could. I don't know.
I'm Kalia Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. Dawn Staley and South Carolina remain on top of the SEC standings after handing Tennessee their worst defeat in program history with a final score of 93-40. In the 43-point win, South Carolina shot 69% from the field. Tessa Johnson had a perfect shooting night, scoring 24 points, shooting 4 for 4 from the floor, including 2 threes, and made all 4 of her free throws. And UCLA remains undefeated in Big Ten play, topping Michigan 69-66 as Player of the Year contender Lauren Betts put up a double-double, scoring 16 points, collecting 16 rebounds, and adding 5 assists and 3 blocks. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
It was just one team getting into the playoff, which I don't think was right. I have said many times, continue to believe outcomes. I don't care because it's not the way I look at it. The Big 12 should have had 2 teams into the college football playoff last year. Now, Jake, I want to start with you on this because BYU was, of course, left out because they lost to Texas Tech twice. The manner in which they lost also did not help, losing on the road and in a neutral site, both by double digits. I think something that hurt the Big 12 last year, where I kind of understand where the committee was coming from. I just think they went too far, and the way I assessed it, I don't think that they got that ultimately right. Miami in over Notre Dame, correct, but Miami in over BYU, not correct. They didn't have as good of a record. They played in a worse conference. They had a worse strength of schedule. I think what hurt the Big 12 last year was the non-conference slate and the lack of quality wins. And also a lineup of pretty poor losses. And I'm talking Baylor losing to Auburn, and Arizona State, who was a good team again, losing to Mississippi State that won just one SEC game. I think those outcomes hurt what is already a negative national perception for the Big 12. And I think it makes it harder for the league to put 2 teams into the playoff, even with the field at 12.
I completely agree with you on that, Spencer. And crazy thing is, BYU Notre Dame is the marquee non-conference matchup for the entirety of the Big 12. And it's going to be BYU kind of carrying the Big 12 banner into that game. And should they win, that would obviously propel the Big 12 into being, I think, getting a little more love from the national media. But that's just one game. We need to have more of these. We need to have more intersectional games is probably the best term to use. And for the Big 12 to prevail in those games, because that's really the only way you're going to change the national narrative around this league. Yes, I think BYU should have been in the college football playoff, but as you mentioned, it was a perception deal. It was the playoff committee wanting to put other teams in. And I completely concur that the Big 12 has to find somehow, some way to get 2 teams into the playoff. But even beyond that, let's say they don't, Spencer, you just got to have a team actually make a run in the playoff, because that would also help change the narrative around this league, because 2 straight years, 2 one-and-dones. That's not a good look.
Christian, what do you make of this?
Yeah, the Texas Tech losing to Oregon the way they did not make it help out at all. And then you talk about past games last year not falling the Big 12 favor, although it's not one of that's main marquee. But let's remember also Georgia Tech beating Colorado. That one didn't help the resume either. That game's going to happen again. Colorado is probably not going to be as good of a team that we expect. So that's probably one that's going in favor of ACC yet again. Hopefully not, but maybe they can find some changes. That BYU Notre Dame game is going to be really important for the entire conference, not just BYU, but to continue to make the conference seen as a reputable conference for the foreseeable future, something that they finally have been pushing so hard. We make jokes about it with Notre Dame finally trying to play BYU. Will they do it? Will they not? Now that it's finally on the table, now that it's finally going to happen, BYU has to capitalize, make it happen. Will there be two teams? Look, if we're in the same exact situation as we were last year, when it was BYU only losing to Texas Tech, only losing to a team that had a first-round bye in the college football playoffs. Yes, it happened twice, but no other team in college football had that same type of resume, only losing to a team with a bye next to their name, not playing the first weekend of college football playoffs. If we're in that same situation, and then, again, the Big 12 is left out, then there's a big, serious problem with the college football playoffs. I think there is a prime opportunity to get two teams in, but we have to prove it. And unfortunately, last year, it just wasn't enough. Apparently.
I want to direct everybody's attention to week 2, which is September 8th to the 13th, because this year's calendar is so wacky and ridiculous. Week 1 is September 5th. That's the first Saturday. Why? It's after my birthday. Why? College football starts the weekend before my birthday. What are we doing? But, we're going to play a national championship on January 25th. Yeah. Anyway, week 2 is going to be massive for the Big 12. Utah plays host to Arkansas, a couple of first-year head coaches. Yeah. Missouri travels to Kansas. It was a great game last year. Missouri got the win in Columbia. Arizona State, I don't know if you guys knew about this one, goes to College Station to play Texas A&M. Oregon goes to Stillwater to play Oklahoma State. UCF plays at Pitt, and Iowa State plays at Iowa. That slate of game, you don't have to win all of them. It does feel like with what we've been talking about and the perception battle the Big 12 is fighting, Jake, you probably have to win more of those than you lose just in that particular week for the Big 12 to get the credit and respect that they want and many feel they deserve.
Well, and to your point, it's actually going to involve, I think, certain matchups that you're going to need to win in amongst those. A win over Pitt, that's great and all, but that's an ACC team. We're talking about the SEC teams. We're talking about the Missouris, the A&Ms. Those are the games people are going to pay attention to and set up and say, if the Big 12 wins those games, hey, Big 12's got some juice, and that will be obviously a big boost early on this season. Yes, BYU and Arizona play that weekend. That's actually the Big 12 lid lifter. It's a Big 12 game because BYU moved Notre Dame later in the season. But out in the non-conference slate, you got to win the majority of those games. And quite frankly, the SEC games are the priority in that respect.
Baylor plays Auburn.
Hey,
Dave Aranda is still there with quarterback DJ Lagway, mind you, taking on the Auburn Tigers, Christian, because why the heck not? Do you have a level of confidence, Christian, that Big 12 teams can go toe-to-toe with these SEC programs and shift this narrative?
Some, yes. Kansas, no. When it comes to that, I'll make sure I put that out there. No, they're not going to win against Mizzou.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. But when it comes to other games, absolutely. I think the game at College Station is completely winnable. And to be completely honest, looking at that game, if it's not for Ohio State, Texas, that's probably College game day that week. Maybe you're probably getting Ohio State, Texas. But other than that, that's probably your College game day. That's going to be one of the most watched games of the entire weekend. And I do think that that's a game that they can absolutely win. Utah, if they shock me and they're not one of the biggest fallers that I think they're going to be in the Big 12, getting a win against Arkansas, Oklahoma State did that a couple years ago as well, but they didn't win a single Big 12 conference game, but they beat Arkansas. So getting that win would also help. There's no doubt about that. Do I think it's possible? Yes, but I'm not going to go down and say it's complete money because Kansas is playing Mizzou and Kansas can't win.
Of course not. That's
spoken like a perfect rival.
Spoken like a perfect rival. And Jalen Daniels isn't there. I don't even remember.
That might help their chances, actually.
Whoa! Derek Johnson is shaking in his boots somewhere, hearing all of this slanderous talk. But I want to touch on Oklahoma State for a moment and get your guys' thoughts. There is, in a perfect world for the fans in Stillwater, a James Madison vibe, an Indiana vibe. You go from being in a really good group of 5 team, you bring over that core, and bang, you hit it off right away. There's even a Colorado comparison here. Shedeur and Travis Hunter were elsewhere. They made their way to Boulder, and all of a sudden, I know those guys were, only at Jackson State because Deion Sanders was there, but I'm just saying there's a blueprint for, hey, you go from bottom dweller to G5 portal infusion, and all of a sudden, you could rise. You could rise in the ranks. I don't think I'm going to go so far because so much has to be built in Stillwater. But I don't know, Christian. Would Oklahoma State being an 8-win team, would that shock you this year?
Because they're in the Big 12? No. And it honestly wouldn't have shocked me last year. That's how crazy it is, because this conference is just so wild. It's the wild, wild west. The parity's insane. Dog eat dog. But this year, I think it would be less surprising because them bringing in a brand new culture, the first time in 21 years, they're going to have a new head coach on opening day. Like, it's going to be absolutely insane in Stillwater. They haven't won a Big 12 game in 2 years. Their Big 12 openers against West Virginia. There is a chance that Eric Morris can walk in and after 2 years of just upsets, 2 years of just sad Big 12 play, he could change the entire narrative, the entire vibes in the Big 12 opener of his collegiate coaching career inside the Big 12. Was it far to say? And I know because you mentioned it, and I agree with you. I think there's a lot to say with Oklahoma State, how low they've been, and I'm not saying they're going to Arlington. But is it fair to say at least one of the 5 X factors in the Big 12 this year is Drew Mestemaker? Is it fair to say?
Yeah,
well,
I think so.
Say, Oklahoma State's fortunes. I know that Eric Morris brought over a lot of talent from that North Texas team, and a lot of them really, really phenomenal players. But the position that matters the most, especially in the Big 12, is that quarterback spot. If Drew Mestemaker is what a lot of people believe him to be, that Oklahoma State squad is absolutely going to be a sneaky pick for a lot of people in the Big 12 and could surprise some folks. But he's got to go out there and prove it because he's leaping up another level. And you mentioned the Colorado comparison, Spencer. I think it's very apt. Yes, we know that Shedeur was at Jackson State with his dad, Deion, but jumping from FCS to the Power 4 level, there are a lot of question marks about if that was going to translate. Obviously, it translated and Colorado benefited from it. We'll see what happens at Oklahoma State. But Eric Morris, I know he's very highly regarded, but his fortunes really reside on the arm of Drew Mestemaker.
He's a quarterback whisperer. That's one thing Eric Morris has. He's Cam Ward, John Mateer. There's been reports that he was telling Mike Leach that he should be given Baker Mayfield scholarships back in the day as well. There's stories all about Eric Morris doing certain things. And let's see if he can find a way to do that in the Big 12 at the Power 4 level. That'd be certainly interesting for sure. Hey, Oklahoma State was rumored to get Colin Klein. That could be one of the reasons why Kansas State jumped the trigger and went and got after him. But in this case, Oklahoma State, I think, landed the right one in Eric Morris. I think he's a perfect fit for Stillwater.
Speaking of quarterbacks, these guys are going to tell me where they feel their team signal callers fall in the conference that has been defined by quarterback play. That still to come on this crossover edition of, well, just about everything, it seems. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's that easy. It's a huge time saver and gives you real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Check them out at TurboTax.com/local. Jake, I want you to start us off. In the new look Big 12 quarterback landscape that does not have Sam Levitt, he's over at LSU, that's got Brendan Sorsby on a different team down at Texas Tech in Lubbock. Where do you put Bear Bachmeier on that list?
Bear Bachmeier is number 2, if not number 1. And I got no problem saying that because
Whoa!
Think about what he accomplished last year, guys, because he transferred from Stanford. He actually didn't arrive in Provo, Utah until mid-June. He had 5 weeks to learn the playbook. He beat out 2 quarterbacks who had well over a year in BYU system in training camp in a matter of 2 weeks, roughly. And then all he did was put together a 3,500 total yard season, leading BYU to a 12-2 mark. The thought of him having a full offseason of work with BYU, going through, obviously, workouts with the team, workouts with his wide receivers, the thought is that he's going to take a major leap in year 2, and it's not going to be a sophomore slump. In fact, it's going to be like a slingshot forward for the man they call the Grizzly here in Provo.
The Grizzly. If you put Bachmeier at number 2, Jake, who would you put at number 1?
I would say a lot of people are going to say it's Brendan Sorsby coming over because of the cast of characters surrounding him at Texas Tech. But he's got a lot to prove because Sorsby's been a very, very good quarterback, but Texas Tech's not wanting very good. They want elite quarterback play. He's going to have to deliver on that because if he does, Texas Tech's going to be a playoff participant, it looks like again. If he doesn't, well, Texas Tech could find themselves falling short of expectations.
Red Raiders top 10 transfer portal class once again, 21 players coming in, no surprise, and they've brought in plenty of talent beyond Sorsby, as you mentioned. I actually disagree with something you said in there. I don't think Sorsby has to be elite for them to make the playoff. I think Sorsby has to be elite for them to win a playoff game because Baron Morton got exposed by Oregon's defense in a number of different fashions, I think more than the overall team did. Sure, they struggled running the ball in that game for the most part, but Baron Morton was a big part of that particular equation. So I think Texas Tech can ride the way Brendan Sorsby played last year, which was really good for the most part, and win the Big 12 once again. Christian, Avery Johnson, though, different conversation. If Kansas State is winning the Big 12 in 2026, he's got to play at a borderline Heisman level, right?
If Kansas State wins the Big 12 in 2026, it's because Avery Johnson was unlocked from Colin Klein, the guy that actually recruited him to Manhattan. I love Avery Johnson. I absolutely do. And he's one of the players that I always talk how very highly of him. Last year, I thought he could be the potential of being a dark horse Heisman candidate based on his talent level. I think that he was being hidden. I don't think the offensive coordinator of Matt Wells wasn't giving him everything he needed to do. If he can get unlocked by Colin Klein and Sean Gleason, by the way, former offensive coordinator of Oklahoma State, very knows how to score points in this conference. Now the new offensive coordinator at Kansas State. If he can do that, then he's going to be towards the top of it. But until then, I'm going to play the game of what have you done for me lately? I'm going to play the game of saying that Avery Johnson, you need to prove me a little bit more in 2026 in your final season in college football. I still think, even though I want more from him, I still think he's a top 5 quarterback in the conference, but I'm not willing, like I was last year, to put him towards the very top.
Christian, if you had a draft pick, if we were in a draft of Big 12 quarterbacks, you got the first pick on the board, who are you taking?
I mean, you probably got to go with the should have been college football freshman player of the year. That's probably who you got to go with.
That would be Bear Bachmeier, of course.
The man who wears number 47, and obviously
yes. Yeah, Christian, you know you're allowed to answer when I confirm what you're.
Yes. I'm sorry, you must not have heard me. I said yes, absolutely. Yeah,
yeah. Maybe I might have cut out for a moment. Hatch and I are sitting here going, "You gonna
answer?
You gonna answer the question, or you just gonna sit there and stare and go, yeah." Yeah, I just gave you gave you a mystery box to go and figure out. Good luck unlocking that thing, man. That's the perfect way to end today's show. Christian Rauh, Locked On Kansas State. Jake Hatch, Locked On BYU Cougars. I'm Spencer McLaughlin. Appreciate everyone listening. See you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.